All right, today we're going to dig into something really powerful and honestly pretty invisible in our day-to-day lives. Let's get right into it. The anatomy of quiet contempt.
So let me just start with a question to get you thinking. What if the most powerful, most damaging attacks are the ones that leave no bruises, no scars, no visible marks at all?
And that question, well, it takes us right into our first section here, which is all about that unseen damage. To really get it, we've got to define what we're even talking about.
So what is quiet contempt? I mean, we're not just talking about someone having a bad day here. The source defines it as a form of psychological violence. And the two words you really got to latch onto are subtle and systematically. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a slow, steady drip, a pattern that chips away at a person's self-worth over time.
This is where it gets really clear. On one hand, you've got obvious aggression, shouting, insults. You can't miss it. But on the other side, quiet contempt. Its weapons are things like a sigh, an eye roll, a tiny pause. They're so subtle you can almost deny them. And because they don't leave any physical marks, they are just incredibly insidious.
But how can these little tiny actions cause so much damage? That's what we're going to break down right now. Let's look at the anatomy of these so-called micro-signals. These are the silent weapons we're talking about. So here's the arsenal, the whole toolkit of quiet contempt. The turn away, the one-word answer, the eye roll. And on its own, any one of these might seem like nothing, right? You might even tell yourself you're overreacting. But when they're used over and over again, they send a really powerful, unspoken message. Let's just zoom in on a couple of the biggest ones.
First up, the eye roll. The classic. It's basically a full sentence without saying a single word. What it says is, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and it's not even worth a real response. It's just a total dismissal.
And then you have the sigh. And we're not talking about a tired sigh. No. This is the exasperated sigh. This one communicates this deep, heavy feeling of disappointment and burden. The unspoken message is loud and clear. You are exhausting me. You're a problem I have to put up with. And all of that gets communicated in just one breath. It's wild.
Now this one is so sneaky, but so powerful. The half-second delay. You know when you say something, and there's just this tiny, perfectly timed pause before the other person answers? That little gap, that silence, is just filled with unspoken judgment. It makes you immediately second-guess yourself, thinking, wait, what did I just say? Was that wrong? Okay, so we have these tiny signals, but how do these fleeting little moments add up to cause real, lasting damage? Well, it's not about any single one of them. It's about how they're used again and again and again in a cycle. It's a conditioning process. And this cycle here, it lays it out perfectly. It all starts with the signal, the eye roll, the sigh. That makes the person on the receiving end start to question themselves. Did I do something wrong? And when that pattern happens over and over, you get to the last, most dangerous step, internalization. The person starts to actually believe the negative message.
And the source material we're looking at just hits the nail on the head with this quote. He starts to adopt her negative evaluation as his own internal truth. That's the end game. The person's negative voice gets inside your head, and pretty soon you don't even need them there to criticize you anymore. You're doing it for them.
So what happens when that negative voice becomes your own inner truth? Where does that lead? The result is what the source material calls a collapse of the core. And this comparison, man, it's just brutal to look at, but it's so important. Look at the transformation. Someone who was once confident becomes doubting. Decisive becomes hesitant. Secure becomes anxious. Proactive becomes apologetic. It is a systematic takedown of who a person is at their very core. Now, the source material we're pulling from uses a very specific phrase for this core self. It calls it masculine polarity. And let's be super clear, as the source defines it, this isn't about being a man or a woman. It's about an energy, that forward-moving, confident sense of direction and purpose. And the whole point is that this is the very essence that gets targeted and just worn down by all this internalized contempt.
Okay, so we've taken this whole thing apart, we've seen how it works, and how damaging it can be. So what do we do about it? How do you fight back? Well, that brings us to our final section, hearing the silence.
So after all this, you might be wondering, okay, I get it, it's bad, but why is just recognizing it so important? Why does simply seeing the pattern for what it is matter so much?
Because right there, that's the whole key. Recognition is the first step to breaking the conditioning. You can't fight an enemy you can't see. The moment you can identify that sigh for what it is, a tool of contempt, it starts to lose its invisible power. You stop that process of internalization before it can take hold.
And that really leaves us with this one last thought. Sometimes the loudest and most important messages in our lives are the ones that are never spoken out loud. So learning to hear what isn't being said, well, that's everything. Thanks for digging into this with me today.